Imagine a time when the world was divided into empires, kingdoms, and today territories, each with its unique culture and politics. In this era of imperialism, many countries had straightforward military structures with clear divisions between branches, like the navy and army reporting into the same command. Simplicity was the key for the success. But one empire stood out for its mind-boggling complexity, and you guessed it right, it was the Austro-Hungarian Empire. With two main founding states, Austria and Hungary, under a single crown, the empire faced a unique challenge. Due to the complicated relationship, they needed an army that could cater to the needs of each member state while still allowing for joint operations on behalf of the empire. And that's exactly what they got. Not one, not two, but three separate armies. Yes, you heard it right. The Austrians had their own army, the Hungarians had their own army, and then there was a third force dedicated to joint operations. The Austro-Hungarian army was the backbone of the empire's military might, existing from 1867 until 1918. This complex organization was comprised of three distinct branches. The Common Army, which was called Gemeinsame Army, which recruited soldiers from across the empire. Then they had the Imperial Royal Landwehr, which recruited primarily from the Austrian territories, and finally the Royal Hungarian Honvédség, which recruited mainly from Hungary. The joint army was established in 1867, somewhat replacing the existing army structure of the Habsburg Empire, when the compromise between Austria and Hungary created the Austro-Hungarian Empire. It existed until the collapse of the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1918 following the end of World War I. The Common Army units were generally poorly trained, and they had very limited access to new equipment, because the governments of the Austrian and Hungarian parts of the empire often preferred to generously fund their own units instead of outfitting all three branches equally. All Landwehr and Honvéd regiments were composed of 3 battalions, while the Common Army regiments had 4. The old white infantry uniforms were replaced in the second half of the 19th century with dark blue ones, which they replaced by grey uniforms during World War I. In September 1915, the field grey was adopted as the new official uniform color. As the Common Army was plagued with supply shortages, when field grey uniforms were first introduced, the remaining stocks of old uniforms remained in use alongside the new color. The Austro-Hungarian Empire consisted of many nationalities, and this reflected in the army also. However, they often suffered from a lack of military interpreters, and this caused way more issues than they cared to admit. Nearly all officers of the upper ranks spoke German, specifically Austrian German, and because only a fraction of the soldiers spoke German, this caused some issues organizing the military. Other challenge was that Hungarian and German are very different languages, making it hard for non-Austrian soldiers to understand commands and instructions. And let's not even mention the language barrier between all other languages spoken. This caused frustration and resentment among these soldiers. The delivery of orders was especially ineffective, and the overly bureaucratic system led to individual ethnic units becoming isolated from high command. To aid communication between many different nationalities, the army developed a simple language called Army Slavic, and this was based primarily on the Czech language due to the high number of Slavic soldiers present. Well, if you already got this far in the video, you might want to subscribe to my channel and maybe like my video. Anyway, back to the topic. Following the 1867 constitutional agreement, the Reichsrat in Vienna was dominated by liberals who generally regarded the army as somewhat of the relic of feudalism. On the other end of the empire, in Budapest, legislators were reluctant to authorize funds for the joint army, but were generous with the Hungarian branch of the army. In 1867, the military budget accounted for about 25% of all government spending. Despite increases throughout the 1850s and 1860s, in the second half of the century, Austria-Hungary was still spending less on its army than other major European powers. Then, the economic crash of 1873 hit Austria-Hungary hard, manifesting in cutbacks in the military budget. In the emerging field of military aviation, Austria-Hungary lagged behind other European states. While balloon detachments had been established in 1893, they were mostly assigned to the fortress artillery, except for a brief period from 1909 until 1911, when they were under the command of the Werkers Brigade. A realization that aviation will become an important part of modern warfare, Austria-Hungary acquired only 5 airplanes by 1911. In 1914, the budget for military aviation was almost negligible. Austria-Hungary entered the war only with 48 first-line aircraft. If you want to learn more about the Austro-Hungarian Air Force, check out my other video about the topic. The link will be in the description. In the wake of defeat in the 1866 Austro-Prussian War, Austria-Hungary avoided all major wars in the era between 1867 and 1914, but engaged in few smaller military actions. Nevertheless, the General Staff maintained plans for major wars against neighboring countries, especially Italy, Serbia and Russia. In the late 19th century, the army was used to suppress unrest in urban areas of the empire, for example in 1882 and 1887 in Vienna, in 1897 in Prague, or in Trieste against Italian rioters in 1902. The most significant military action for the army in this period was the Austro-Hungarian occupation of Bosnia and Herzegovina in the summer of 1878. The Austro-Hungarian troops entered the province expecting little or no resistance. However, they met strong opposition from both Muslim and Orthodox population. Despite the setbacks at Maglaj and Tuzla, Sarajevo eventually was occupied in October. The Austro-Hungarian losses of this operation was somewhat over 5,000 soldiers. In 1868, the number of active duty troops in the army was around 355,000 and the total could be expanded to 800,000 upon mobilization. However, this was significantly less than the European powers such as France or the North German Confederation or Russia, each which could field more than 1 million men. Although the population of the empire had risen to nearly 50 million by 1900, the size of the army was tied to the ceilings established in 1889, which was not revised until 1912 when the new regulation allowed for increase in annual conscriptions. As you see, Austria-Hungary had a complex military structure. The country had 3 main distinct ground forces. The Common Army was the main land force. It was meant to be the best equipped and had the main role to secure the borders of the monarchy. In case of war, it was to absorb the Austrian Landwehr and the Hungarian Honvédség within its command structure. For that reason, the Common Army was organized in army corps even in peacetime, while the Landwehr and the Honvédség were organized in territorial districts. The provinces of Bosnia and Herzegovina were governed as a condominium between the Austrian and the Hungarian parts of the dual monarchy. Due to this, the local troops of Bosnian riflemen were subordinated through the governor of Bosnia and Herzegovina to the Imperial Minister of War. Just to make it more complicated, other than the 3 armies, existed the Landsturm and the Standschützen branches. The Landsturm was a militia outside of the regular army, both on the Hungarian and on the Austrian side. 40 regiments totaling 136 battalions in Austria and 32 regiments totaling 97 battalions in Hungary. The Landsturm was a reserve force intended to provide replacements for the first line units. However, they also provided 20 brigades to join the rest of the army in case of war. The Standschützen were originally rifle guilds and rifle companies that had been formed in the 15th and 16th centuries and were involved in military operations within the borders of the Austrian county of Tyrol. This was a Tyrolean local militia or home guard called upon to serve during the war if Tyrol was in danger. So to recap, we have the command of the army. Then under them we had 3 armies, but in case of war 2 of them dissolved into the common army. Then we also have 3 militias that 2 of them also sent active units to aid the army, while the one could be only used in Tyrol. It seems complicated, isn't it? But that would be it for this video. This is already getting long and confusing, so I will discuss the organization of the Austrian Landwehr and the Hungarian Honvédség in the upcoming videos. So thank you for joining and see you in the next one.